This is Lindy Kaiser and Jill Hamilton with clearancejobs.com. We are here to talk about our 2022 Security Clearance Compensation Report. We are live here across our social media channels. We haven't done it in a while, but hopefully you've seen our posts and updates go out about the compensation report. We do it once a year. It is a critical pulse point into the national security space and industry. The report is run by the glorious Jill Hamilton, soup to nuts, from literally gathering all of the respondents in, more than 50,000 respondents this year, which I kind of wanted to encapsulate that as a percentage of the cleared population. That is like a huge percentage to get responses to for a survey like this. Huge number of responses to this survey. And again, the link to download the report is in the blurb here for this update. So click on it there. We'll also add it to the comments. Hi, Antonio. Hi. Hello, friends. So definitely jump in there and check out the report because it is full of a lot of great data. So check it out. Just overview, Jill, what were the biggest takeaways or kind of what is your once over for the 2022 Security Clearance Compensation Report?
I think the biggest thing that always stands out to me is just how big compensation matters to the workforce, which I know sounds like so high level, but we love to talk about all the different things that employees want or what candidates are pushing for. We could talk more about the whole remote debate, but at the end of the day, compensation always tops out. And even in talking to recruiters on just how much candidates are pushing for higher and higher compensation right now, and the battle for talent is big, huge, So, but it really does come down to the money. We want to have a good mission to support in national security, but you want to get compensated as well too. And that theme, despite all the different shifts that we see, like little kind of like when we take the pulse of the industry and what's happening, we see some little kind of tweaks and adjustments. And so it's not make a huge change this year, even though it's a slight dip. There's just like a little different things that have happened in the industry that you can feel it in the compensation number, but it really is about people want to get compensated, and you see it a lot throughout all the different questions.
Heard of inflation, Jill? That mortgage isn't paying for itself, man.
No, man, the DC area, you gotta fight people out to
people
win a contract.
William says security clearances suck. We don't even want you, William. Go find another thread. Joseph said happy to be here. So we're glad to have you, Joseph. Thank you. So yeah, I think it's always interesting to see what the compensation numbers are. And again, the security clearance compensation report is clearly representative of the security clearance population. I think it's always worth noting. We get a lot of questions about who is response to the survey, who kind of who are our respondents, what is the profile of a respondent. Incredibly diverse group of people. And that's what I always kind of say. It's not just tech. It is a lot of tech, but it's not only tech. Mm-hmm. There are blue collar cleared workers. There are people work in a cross section of industries. I thought what was, interesting about the responses this year is we certainly saw, I think it's because of how small our industry is, it's hard to see big shifts happen. We're not seeing like huge fluctuations in who is a cleared worker. So what we had was a 6% reduction in baby boomers, however, with a 6% increase in millennials. So I would certainly call that significant. So maybe talk about the demographics and what we saw there.
Yeah, we've talked for years about wanting to get a younger talent in. We saw a 1% increase in Gen Z. So a little tiny bump on that. And then definitely that 6% in millennials, Gen X staying stable. That we're pretty stable bunch. No, just kidding. And then just a slight.
Nobody likes to talk about Gen X. Although
no one does.
My favorite was talking about what was my favorite quote from Ukraine. I'm digressing. I have a hard time staying on topic. Jill knows. Was the Ukrainian president is like it's like the Gen Xer versus the baby boomers. We're seeing it overseas. Everybody underestimates Gen X, man, but they're going to be leading the world here.
Yeah. Maybe. I saw that quote out on Twitter and I thought, is there an article there? The Gen Xer versus the boomer. Just kidding. Yeah. We love you. We love them all.
Everybody, the workforce, but we're seeing the graying of the workforce. It's something that the defense industry has been talking about for years, and so to see the statistics start to bear that out, I think is relevant. And saying like, hey, our national security workforce needs to continue to bring in new people to compete. That is incredibly important. And again, we see the compensation report. It covers a cross section of industries, but we do see cyber is king. And so we refer to the suits and the cyber. So the two demographics that typically pay the best are management, so high-level program managers, business sales professionals, and then the cybersecurity professionals. I think this year, maybe for the first time, or at least beating out last year, business sales used to be top in compensation. Today, a cyber role took that spot. And you actually saw there was a specific differential, like cyber pays significantly more than the average. So maybe how did that bear out in the survey results? How much more does cyber pay than the average cleared professional?
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely there's a big difference with management roles as well as some of the tech roles. I mean, obviously not every single tech role will do that, but definitely like your systems engineering as well as data science and IT software. Those are your roles where they are getting the top. They're within the top 5 um, compensation categories, and that's really where you're seeing the highest end of them. I mean, they're all about 30,000 more than the overall average, which is a pretty big difference. So yeah.
So it certainly still pays to be in cyber. We're seeing cybersecurity roles. And then talk about the experience factor too. I think it's worth noting our compensation report goes over kind of the differences between, you know, occupation and years of experience. So kind of, and you wrote about that in the report. What are some of the factors that play into a higher level of compensation? It's experience, it's occupation.
Yeah, definitely. For sure, it's the occupation. I mean, not every single role, depending upon your experience, is going to pay out there. But over time, experience, when you look at the scales, it keeps jumping up, and the longer your experience resume is, the bigger the jump. And sometimes with even in some of the blue collar jobs, it will be like a 15 to 20K difference the longer your experience level goes there. But certifications also play a role into that. We'll have another white paper coming out later this year on top certifications and just the difference that can make. And then obviously education level works into that too. It's kind of that when you see somebody who has a triple threat, is what I would call them, if they've got the education, they have the experience, and then they have the certifications, you see usually a major bump in pay from that. But even just adding 1 or 2 of those will get you up higher than the average bear in the workforce.
Yeah, and then the other shift that we saw was, you mentioned remote work at the beginning. So the DC Metro is always the dominant workforce when it comes to cleared workers. It's just DC, Maryland, Virginia, the most cleared jobs. California and Texas certainly have sizable populations, but if you lump them together, nobody can top the DC Metro. We did see a slight decline though in DC Metro respondents. Do you think, that the workforce there's maybe some more flexibility there or remote work happening out there?
There could be. I mean, I live in the DC area, and the real estate market is really crazy right now. I just went through my own move, but that was an accidental move. But for those people who are out there looking, there's just not a lot. So it's just interesting to me to see that drop. But I did see definitely an increase in places like Texas, got a 1% increase, Florida got a 1% increase, and then other places on the map popped up as well, like Michigan, hasn't typically been represented in our survey. But I mean, they've been in there before, but the numbers have just been so low that suddenly they kind of hit the threshold to be a player on the list this year. So, and then it's just in like areas where you wouldn't typically see hubs, they're kind of like popping up all through the country. So, as DC area maybe goes down just a little bit, it was only 3% drop, but still it does make a difference. You see it popping up in other areas around the country. So
yeah. So again, if you're just tuning in, this is Lindy Kaiser and Jill Hamilton with clearancejobs.com. We were talking about the results Good branding of our 2022 security clearance compensation report. You can click on the link in the description here to download a copy. It will certainly behoove you to download a copy of that report to understand what we're talking about here. Super useful intelligence and information for security clearance recruiters who are trying to hire. Also great information, though, for candidates as well who are looking to learn more about their value, the pay differentials for polygraph levels, for clearance levels, for geographic region. Talks about the top states that veterans want to relocate to, which I thought was a super interesting statistic. I see we have a lot of chatter in the comments here from veterans who are getting ready to separate. We'll have a separate report, again, teasing to future content later on, specifically into that active duty cleared respondents, because we actually pull out their responses from this report, since active duty compensation is such a different beast, different animal, really, a lot more specific. So the report talks more broadly about government workers or contract workers, but we will have a report that talks about the active duty population later on. Somebody asked in the comments how long their clearance remains current after separating from active duty. The time frame is still 2 years from the last use of the clearance. And that's a big, segment of the population for who recruiters are looking to target and get to, is the active duty military population, just because there's so many of those folks that separate with the military. So, and come and work in the cleared workforce. So what are some of the takeaways when it comes to the top maybe employment, where, top states for compensation and top job categories, maybe your industry for compensation, that you saw in the report?
Yeah, so the top states, they continue to still be some of the same places with, you got DC, Maryland, Virginia, and then you also have just in terms of population growing, Texas and Florida, and of course Alabama's on there. California and Colorado, compensation wise, keep a little bit more pace with the DC area when it comes to payment. But then also other places like Massachusetts, there's not a huge population there, but the compensation is up there. Same with like New Jersey. So higher cost of living, higher compensation. So yeah. I think some of the biggest draw for the DC area, I love it, but not just the history, not just the diversity and all the different opportunities, but you do, like, if you're working for a contractor, you do have a lot of opportunities to jump around and find new employers. So it's helpful to find locations where you don't have to stay with one employer. When I first started out in the defense industry, I was in a location where there was pretty much just one employer, and I got that job right out of college, and that was great. But if I wanted to leave, I would be leaving my clearance behind and going and doing something else in the area. And so that's sometimes when you see these hubs where a population is growing, that's a big factor for people's security clearances. If you want to put it to use and you don't want to be with just one company always, sometimes they're great, that's great. But, it gives you a lot more opportunity to move around it should your career need that. So,
and there's a reason, like, the DC Metro is compensated. There is a, you even talked about the I-495 Beltway differential in the compensation report, and how, respondents who work within that corridor, I think it was like 20,000. Am I making that up? There's a pay differential specifically for working inside the Beltway. And again, these are the kind of statistics you can find inside the report if you want all the nuance of saying, hey, I work inside the Beltway. What is potentially the pay differential for working there versus not? Again, divided out by certifications. And then again, we saw with tech positions, tech versus non-tech, there was a $30K pay increase for those working in those cyber and technical roles. So again, a lot of military transition folks I see in this thread, there's just something to know about, if you want to know which industries are hot to transition into and where compensation is, there's definitely, a lot of, pay increase based on those cyber positions. But opportunities across all job categories. And again, I think where you see in the report is once you start to get years of experience across all industries, that does make a difference. So not all positions are created equal outside of the starting gate, but as you start to gain experience, there is a compensation increase based on that.
Yeah, that's for sure. And one thing, even from personal experience, noting that sometimes the DC area or even California or Colorado, you're going to see the higher paying areas it translates better a little bit later, like mid-level to later in your career as well. Like sometimes positions, there's only a few $1,000s difference, when you're fresh out of the gate. So if you're, Gen Z and you're just starting out, there might be a lot of jobs in some of these bigger hubs, but your cost of living is so high that it's hard to function and live there. And your salary is probably going to be the same in like a smaller section of the world, out in a smaller area, lower cost of living, and then just transferring in a little bit later. There's a lot of different options to play with it, but you'll see the bigger differences for those areas. I think the farther along in your career you are.
Mm-hmm.
So
we're unpacking the results of our 2022 security clearance compensation report. We've gotten a few questions about the cost of obtaining a security clearance, and that is a common question that we do get on the site. We have a few news articles, so if you go to news.clearancejobs.com, you can find the answer to those questions. An individual can actually obtain their own security clearance. So kind of when we're talking about the benefits of a security clearance, the benefit is because the government does pay for the cost of obtaining a security clearance. If you do not have a clearance and you are looking to be sponsored, though, there is a lot of, again, across the national security workforce, we talked about the shifts in demographics. The national security workforce does want to bring more people in. They are trying to attract and hire more people. There are a lot of companies that are willing to sponsor security clearance. So if you search willing to obtain clearance or clearance sponsorship or some of those search terms online, you can find other companies, industries that are willing to sponsor someone to get into a security clearance. Again, somebody also asked, hey, my clearance expired after I left the military. How can I get my TSSCI back? You would have to go through that full process again to get a sponsorship and to get a position. Somebody also asked about the value of a security clearance in non-DoD roles. We do break that down in the compensation report. DoD is the biggest section of the cleared workforce, but certainly not the only and not the highest paying. Maybe talk about what are some of the other agencies that have cleared workers and where you can find their compensation information in that report.
Right. So if you look to down through the government by agency is how you want to look for that, or even clearance type or the clearance levels, that can kind of give you that information as well. But while we don't have as many respondents from the intelligence community, you do still typically find that the compensation for them is 20 to 30K higher than like the DoD levels, at least with a secret level clearance. And that's partially too, you also have a very wide variety of jobs within the DoD secret level. So it's not quite, can't take that quite to the bank. Like it's not always the expectation. Obviously, like your career level matters, your background matters, the occupation matters. It all goes into that number. But if you're looking at overall averages, you typically will see that difference. So
yeah, no, and I think Department of State, TSA. We just published an article this week about TSA cleared positions. I think sometimes there's government agency. I've seen Department of Commerce. So if finance, IRS, some of those might be public trust, even other than clearance positions. But the need for folks to have some level of background investigation across a variety of government agencies is pretty high. So increase in the financial sector, I can't remember what those stats are. So you might have to actually download the report. Somebody asked about the finance section, but we do have a breakdown for, I think that's one of the job categories that we outline is cleared finance professional. So we do report on numbers. So we talk a lot about cyber because it's so high paying. We do break down like data science, systems engineering, software engineering, but there are certainly a number of non-IT positions you can see average compensation for as well. Several folks are asking for the link to the report. I will continue to add that in the comments later after I go clean it up afterwards.
And finance typically is a 6-figure salary as well. So as somebody who formerly did the finances on the on a contract, every contract needs somebody in finances. So as well as, company wide, you need people working on the finance section. So it's definitely necessary.
Yeah. And somebody said Department of Energy has openings. Yeah, we have a lot about Department of Energy. We actually list it because that's a separate clearance category. Department of Energy runs its own personnel security program and appeals and process. So it's pretty easy to outline those. And Department of Energy traditionally used to be a pretty high compensation level too. So Department of Energy security clearances certainly paid. And part of that was the skill level that the Department of Energy requires as well. So Department of Energy. Several people have asked about adjudications. We're here to answer your clearance questions as well as talk about the compensation report. Adjudication timelines, I think we're averaging like 30 days, approximately 30 days to a month for DoD clearance applicants. So adjudication timelines, you can find that again all at news.clearancejobs.com. We have articles that we publish with average clearance processing times. They do break down adjudication timelines. The adjudication timelines are way longer for the IC in general, just like clearance processing times are way higher as well. But we're talking about today, and we're going to wrap it up pretty soon here. I'm about at time here. Talking about the security clearance compensation report. Certainly download a copy of the report. Check it all out. We have a lot of great information about security clearance, average compensation. If you have questions about the report, again, we will be tuning into the comments later and respond to those. So definitely reach out to us if there's other data I think will be interesting. We'll be writing about the 50,000 plus responses we got for the rest of the year. So I'm sure Jill and I would love to get your intel and insights if there's other questions that you have, folks who have tuned in. Anything else about the compensation report? It was your baby, Jill. What do you love? What do you hate? Like all parents, what do you want people to know about your child?
I love like just like you get to look back at the numbers and you make assumptions that you see out there like in real time, over the years, and then you get to see it actually for real. Like should you go for a master's degree? I mean, it all depends. Depends upon your occupation if you'll see a return on investment. But the overall average says yes. There's like a $20,000 difference average for what bachelors make, people with a bachelor's and people with a master's make. Even professional degree or a doctorate, it jumps up like 10 to 20K more. Again, occupation matters, but you should see a higher compensation at least over time as your experience catches up to that. But I still think that the remote debate is like the biggest one to me, that because a lot of people in national security don't get it. They're still in there day in, day out, and have been throughout the pandemic. And I think this past year too, like satisfaction levels, there's been like a slight dip in that. And it's also because like life is just like extra hard. There's more things to do and the same level of expectation as there was pre-pandemic with being in the office and all that. And I think people are just really tired. And so their number one thing are like, hey, if you can't give me remote work, pay me. Like just give me more time off or give me a bonus or something. Just they don't want snacks. That was kind of my favorite, where like, because I put there was all these different options you could choose. And it's like, just do nothing instead of snacks.
More people were likely to pick nothing as a perk than in-office snacks.
Right.
The days of in-office snacks, COVID has ruined it. Nobody wants your food at the office anymore. It's actually,
it could have germs in it. Why would I want to? I don't want to share with other people. No, I do want to share, but
nuts with the side of infectious diseases. Please stop by my desk anytime. The remote piece is big, and you point that out, and I think, that's totally worth noting. And the other thing too, salary reviews are coming up. I know our salary reviews are coming up soon with our company, Jill. So I'm gonna be writing notes from the compensation report. I think the figures that are most important are not necessarily the averages, because we noted that there's no such thing as an average cleared worker. What is relevant is saying that, hey, if you have a master's degree, you make an average of 20,000 higher than the average cleared worker. If you have an industry certification that pays approximately 13,000 higher, or whatever the case is. So looking through a few of those things, and those matter because when it comes to labor codes, that's how the government is typically billing those things as well. What niche skills do you have and how do those work? So I think that's super relevant and helpful information to have. So again, download a copy of the report, and huge kudos to, again, Jill Hamilton with Clearance Jobs for putting together a great report. So check it out, folks. Share it with your friends. Download the 2022 Security Clearance Compensation Report. Hot, live and coming out today. So thank you for joining us for this live stream. Appreciate everybody's comments and information.